Coming to array. So here's a quick tips before we do this. As usual, the libraries. Okay. If at all you guys have questions, please stop me in between. On previous, before we use array, when we use or declare variables, in an example, if we have a variable number to store values of number, we just declare integer number. Okay. And if something to do with decimal points or floating point number, we will declare as float, say something called variable price. So in ringgit, okay, so we have it in floating point. And then things we do is like when we want something to do with string or character, we declare char. Example like variable name. Of course, since char only accept single characters, so when we have a name, of course, it's more than one alphabet. Therefore, we have to declare in a standard array, okay, with a size of 50. So this is how we use on basic variable declaration, okay, the non-array. And if at all we want to display the values, we will printf. Okay, let's put an example. This is phone number. Question. So the normal way or standard way is just it accept one value only. Going to F for float, which is price, and then string for name. Okay, so I'm going to initialize here just as an example. So assume number is value 8, price equals to say 29.9. Okay, and name equals to, I'll just put in my name. Okay, so if I execute this, I get my output as usual. So you guys are familiar with this. So this is the standard way of using variables. Okay, here's the thing. The disadvantage of this is if you notice each variable, okay, can only store one value at a time, which means if I try to put extra values on this, I have to declare another variable. So maybe like number 2. Then only I'll be able to store extra values. And then of course I have to add in for the printf. Okay. So the purpose of array that we are learning at this moment is to allow you to store multiple values, which means more than one value. Okay, so it allows you to store more than one value on the same variable name. So which means if you have integer number, you can use this variable, but you can store more than one value. So that's the purpose of array. It's on storage. Okay, so how do we declare and use for array? Okay, the things that you have to do from the standard variable, which you're able to store only one value, you'll have to add this square bracket. If you notice in your variable name for the type char, if you don't declare this, you'll be able to store only one alphabet. But the moment you declare this, that is why it's called an array actually. You are allowed to store up to 50 characters. So same goes to the other data type, integer, float, and so on. You just have to add this square bracket, and what happens is that it converts it to an array. So when it converts to array, you can use the same variable. The only difference is you can determine how many values do you want to store for this array type. Okay. For char, it's a special case. When you're doing as this, you can only store one value or one string with multiple alphabets. But when you make it to an array, if you want to store more than one name, you have to add in front the square bracket. So this will let you know how many names do you want to store, and for each name, how many characters or alphabets that you're able to key in or store. Okay, that's on the second one. So now for this example, I'm going to show you the basic array. So I'm not going to go with something big. I'm just going to use 2. So I'll be able to store 2 integer type values. Okay, and I'm going to store also 2 floating type values for the variable name price, and I would like to store 2 name as well. Okay, so the moment you do this, please ignore the one on the right here. Okay, the moment you do this, just a second, we have a message. All right, no, okay. So the moment you do this, you are converting this variable to an array type. So now we have an integer number that can store 2 values, float price that can store 2 values, and also char name that can store 2 values or name. So when it comes to initialization, or when we want to assign values into this array, on a normal variable, we just put it like this: the assignment equals sign and then the information. For array, you'll have to put the curly bracket. So in our case, there will be a curly bracket since it's accepting more than 1 values. Okay, and of course, since we are initializing here, so we are assigning the values immediately to the array variables. For variable number 2, it needs 2. Therefore, in the curly bracket, you'll have a comma to separate between the first value and the second value. So in my case, I want to put say value 7. Okay, so same goes to floating. For floating point for price, so there'll be a comma to separate between the values. All right, and same goes for the name. So this is how we initialize for array. So if you have this variable number that you want to store, say up to 5 or 10 numbers, then you'll have more commas and each of it to represent 1 value. All right, so if you have 3, then add the comma, add the third value, and so on. Okay, so this is basic initialization for the array. But now let's print out this information. In order to do that, we'll maintain the same thing, but the only difference happen here is that since these variables are array type, so you have to key in the index or the value. So therefore, you have to add in this square bracket. Okay, saying about array, I think you guys already viewed the video and read some online. So in array, there is something called index, which means if you take a close look at here, when you declare 2, it allows you to store 2 integer type value in this variable number, which is 1 and 2. Okay, but in order to access this information, there is something called index, which is I would say the location or address for you to retrieve this value. So for array, this is what students always tend to forget. Always remember that the first value in this array is represented with index 0. So you will always start with index 0, which means let's assume there's a 0 on top here that is pointing to this value. Okay, and then 1, index 1 will point to this value. So if you have 3, you will have index 0, index 1, and index 2 right after this. So always remember, when you access the values in an array, it needs to start with index 0, not 1. This is not 1, this is not 2. It is index 0 and index 1. So what are we going to do is we're going to print out the first value of all of this array. Okay, keep in mind I'm showing together for all the type, integer, float, and char. These are all array. Okay, so we're going to view or print out the index 0, which is the first values or item in this array. Okay, so let's compile and run. And what you'll get is this. Okay, so when we put index 0, it will retrieve the first value in this array. So in our case, it's 8 for the integer number, 29.9 for the price float, and covalent, which is my name, for the char name. Okay, so if I want to access the second values, I have to change it to the index 1. Do keep in mind, this is the advantage of the array. The variable name will still be the same. The only thing that changes is the index or the location of the value. So if I run this, I will get the second information, which is the second one, 7, 18.88, and Murti. So this is how you access or print out the values from an array. Okay, so now since we are looking on the output, so let's take a look on how do we initialize or get input into the array. All right. So this is for variable declaration. This is for the output. And let's take a look on input. So as usual, when we get input, we will be using scanf. Okay. So for the first one, we are going to take a number. So, number. We are going to get 3 input. So first one for number, so decimal type. Second one price, so floating point. And third is a name in a string, so S. And then we'll put in the variable. Okay, now the difference when on regular variable declaration, we just put in the variable name. But when it comes to array, since we are having more than one values that we can store, so you need to let this scanf know at which location do you want to take an input for the index 0 or index 1. Okay, so what you have to do is same as the printf, you have to use the bracket, square bracket, and put in the index. At this moment, I want to put it in index 0. Okay, so since I'm going to get input from the user, therefore I don't have to initialize this array variable at this moment. So I'm going to remove this. Okay, so what I'll be able to do now is get an input from user for all the three, and then I'm going to output on the screen based on the input of the user. Okay, to make things a little neat, of course, I want to print out instruction. Why the user might not know what to input. So key in for number, and then the second is on price. And third is name. Okay, so we'll get input from the user into the array, and then we'll output. So let's try this. So this is my screen. Let me just zoom. So I want a number 5. Price, let's say 990. Name. Now let's put some other name. So when I enter, I've inputted these three information into my array, and now I get exactly the output from the array. So this is how we insert values into an array for storage. So this is basically very basic. So hopefully the basic example helps you guys for a better understanding. So now we will look a little bit complex. So since you have seen that, how do we declare for an array? How can we get information into the array? And how can we output from the array? But now, my question will be, the reason we are using array because we don't want to use multiple variables, which means if I have to take at least 5 number values, I don't want to declare number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and so on. So if I have 100, I can't be declaring integer with 100 different variable name for the number. That is why we use array, because it allows us to do something like this. We can store up to however how big the numbers or the values that we want to store. So let's assume we have 100 different numbers, we have 100 different price, and we want to take 100 different names. Okay, so array lets you to do that by just using the same variable. But here's the catch. If I have to store huge or larger values in this array, this is not the optimal way to input, because if I have to do this 100, I have index 0 up to index 99. Okay, always remember it's n minus 1. So you have 100 values, your index starts from 0 up to 99. So I can't be, copy and paste this for 99 times and keep changing this index. Therefore, there is a way to do this, which we have to utilize looping. Okay, so how do we do the looping? Okay, I'm not going to show 100 because this will be tiring to clean 100. So I'm going to show just basic about 3. Okay, but the concept is the same. So for this example, I'm just going to show 3. And rather than I copy paste this for 3 times with index 0, index 1, index 2, I'll be using the loop. Since we know since we know that for this array declaration, we only need 3. We need 3 values. So we know how big the loop size is. Since we know, I would suggest or recommend to use for loop. So if you get other questions, doesn't matter. If it's not array, other things. If you know how many times you can loop or you need to loop, then use for loop. But if you are not sure, one example, if you are repeating something like you ask the user, do you want to continue or not? Okay, that is something that we don't know how many times the user wants to repeat the application. For that case, you have to use while loop. Okay, but in our case, because we know, so we are going with for loop. So for loop, they have 3 things. First, initialization of the variable of the loop. Second is the condition, and third is the increment or decrement. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to copy, we're going to cut this and put it in the loop. Why? Because for array, we tend to use a large number. Like I said just now, if you want to use 100 values, you can't be copy paste this 100 times. So we will use the loop. Okay, so for the counter, we declare integer I equals to 0. So it starts from 0. So what's the condition for I? Since we have 3, the size of the array is 3, we have index 0, 1, and 2. So we want I to loop up to 0, 1, and 2. So it's less than 3, which means it will loop up to 2 because it's less than 3. And then I plus plus. Okay, so when I do this, it is going to loop from I equals to 0, and then it will finish, then I will become 1, it will run again, and then it will finish. I'll become 2, it will run, so 3 times already. And then when I become 3, is it true? It's not, it's false. So this thing inside here will only loop 3 times. Okay, so now, so since we're going to loop 3 times to get the information, our scanf have to input into this array from the index 0, index 1, and index 2. So of course, we can't specify this number here, or else it will be overwriting. So how do we tell this array variable where? We will use this I. Since I is going to move from 0, 1, and 2, so it is going to move for us as an index 0, 1, and 2. So we will put the I inside here. And what happens is that this will loop 3 times. And each time, for the first time, it will go for index 0. And then second time, it will go for index 1. And third time, it will go for index 2. So this allows us to get multiple inputs. All right. So now we're going to do this input. But of course, same goes to your output. You can't be doing this as manual. What I mean by manual, something like this, where you change, okay, next index 1. This is called manual, but this is not optimal. If you have 300, you can't be doing this for 300 times. So we will also put the output into the loop. So how is it? The same. Copy this. You will use back the same for loop, but of course, the only thing that's going to change is, oh, I deleted name. Okay, never mind. I'll retype this. We have number, price, and name. So this is going to be index. So we will use I, but since we're using I up, so let's have another variable j. So for j equals to 0, j less than 3, j plus plus will go from index 0, 1, and 2. So we have j here. Okay. And third, what we have just now? Name. Right? So it is string. So we'll output exactly all the input that we have created in. But let me see, there might be an issue here for scanf name. Let's try first. Let's run this. I believe there'll be a skipping here, but let's give a try. So what happens that when we execute this, so it's going to ask us 3 times. So let's key in. For number, the first one is number 1. Price is 10 ringgit. Name is 1. Okay. This is for the second one. So we key in as number 2. Price say 20.22 ringgit. And name is 2. This is for the third. So number 3. Price 33.33. And name is third. Okay, so when I enter, it will no longer ask input because the loop is only for 3 times. So what happens is that it will just produce the output. Okay, we have a missing for the name. So as you can see, index 1 is in properly, index 2 is same, and index 3 is same except for the name. So let's figure out that name issues. Okay, this one, it's not dot, it's supposed to be just string. Let's try again. So far there's no skipping. If you guys encounter that your input skips, what I mean by skips is that you tak sempat nak type this number or this value, it moves to the next input. When you encounter that, cari dekat mana it miss, and katakan if it miss dekat sini, if it miss at here, that means at the name, it come out price, it comes out name. Okay, so then you know that it is skipping at price. Dia keluar terus kat name. You have to put F flush. Okay. I think I did show before, I'm not sure. Standard input. Okay, you just have to put this. So when you do this, it will not skip the input for price. Dia akan pergi pada price dulu, then dia akan pergi name. If it skip again, you just have to put this in between. Okay, that is one option. All right. Another one is by using get ch or get. For that you have to include conio, conio.adder. Okay, I've showed before. So that's just a reminder. If your input skips, in our case it doesn't skip yet, so yeah, let's run this first. So I'll test again. Number 1, this is for float, this is for string. Number 2, float and string. Number 3, this is for the float and string. Okay, so this is looping for input to array. This is looping output from array. So as you can see, it outputs the number, the price, and the name. Okay, of course you can play around with the formatting. That's on you. You can play with the formatting. So this is how we get multiple inputs and we do multiple outputs for array. Okay, but there is one thing that I want to show here, because C programming, they have a little bit problem when it comes to string. Okay, when we say string 50 characters, if you take a name, you want to key in name which has space. I'm not sure if you guys, for those using Mac, using Xcode, or you're using Dev C++ or other IDE, but code blocks have this issue. Okay, I think it's related to C programming. Assume, one example. Okay, if I put my name in not just 50 character, but I put a space and then I continue. Usually, for scanf, C programming will accept that space means enter, so it's going to skip this second name here. Okay, let's see if it does. I think it will skip. So if I enter, yes, it skips. So assume this goes into the next variable. Let's test here, and then the output, you will not get, my last name will be missing. My last name will be missing. Let's test. Okay, as you can see, my last name skipped to here. Okay, so if you encounter this problem, if I'm not mistaken, it is a C programming issues. Scanf requires a special tag, which is something to do with percentage. There is a asterisk, there is a bracket, there is a star /n, percentage again, C, no, star C. I forgot. There is a way to actually get for the entire characters and accept the skipping, okay, or the empty spaces. But yeah, I don't memorize this, and I don't assume you guys to memorize as well. So when you come to that case, what you have to do is, rather than using this, I want you guys to use gets. Okay, how does gets work? Just like this. Yep. Just use this. Okay. So when it comes to string, array for string, if you want to accept space and all the other special characters, just use this. But of course, this is not recommended lah. The proper way to do it is actually by using fgets, which you need to include 3 parameters, which is the name, the size. At this moment, it is size 50. So you have to tell the size, and then you have to put this standard input. So this is a proper way to use it lah. But if you don't use the fgets, it's fine. You can just use gets. It's a bit easy. Okay, so this allows us to accept space. So let's test this. Number 1. Okay, it is skipping. Hold on. So since it's skipping, I'm going to put the F flush here. Okay. Here. So number 1, price 1.11, name 1, this example with a space. Number 2, price 2.22, name 2. If you use the standard scanf, only one side, after the space, it will consider as a second input. Okay, number 3, 2.33, and okay, so as you can see, now it accepts the space. So if you are doing it in your project, or even in your, I would say, your hands-on test 2 and so on, okay, if you want to key in name that requires first name, last name, and space, or you have 3 names, middle name, and so on, yep, you can use gets rather than scanf. And the idea is very simple. You don't have to put the, what we call the apostrophe or the code. You just have to put in straight the variable name, but do not forget the ampersand. Okay. So here's the complete briefing explanation on array. So this is how you declare, and this is how you do the looping to get the input, and this is how you do it for the output. So if you have, say, this for 300, okay, and so on, you will be able to get all the input from the user. So it will use the same variable name but different index. So for 300, there's index 0 up to 299. Okay, so that is for the array, how to use it. So at this moment, we are looking at one-dimensional array.